6:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. Happy New Year is our first meeting of the new year. We'll go ahead and take roll, please.
Mack.
Here.
Braden. Here. Albert.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
And Miller.
Here.
Thank you. That's quorum. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve the agenda for this evening, including the personnel addendum report that was sent earlier today.
So moved. Second.
Okay.
Miller.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
And LaCroix.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Do we have any public comments signed up for the first round? Yep. No, that's fine. Yep.
Okay, all right. I'm Liz Wixer. I'm a resident and parent. I don't know if it's a comment or a question. The section of grassy area that's at the end of the parking lot, that's a kind of a connection point where students tend to walk through there. My question to the board was just whether it's something that the PTO could fundraise towards paying for paving that so that it becomes an actual walkway, or if that's something that falls under D46's, infrastructure budget. So that was all. I can email you about that. We just talked about it at the PTO meeting. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, and now the fun part. We have the recognition this evening for the Grays Lake Middle School 7th grade boys basketball conference champs. Very exciting. Welcome this evening, and I'll turn it over.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure. I'm Aaron Gross. I'm the assistant principal of Grays Lake Middle School, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our young men here who were our 7th grade boys basketball conference champions. Not only did they, of course, win their championship and show their athletic ability, but not only that, but they represented D46 and Grays Lake Middle School immensely well by their attitudes, their positive, just go-get-itness, and also just their sportsmanship. And the amount of comments that we received from other buildings and other coaches was really outstanding. And so not only are we so thankful and here to support them or celebrate them for their achievement in the sports realm, but also just who they are as people overall. So please, I'm going to ask Mr. Ben Block here, who's the coach of the team, to come up and kind of share some things, but please help me in celebrating and thanking our young men here. So thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Benjamin Block Glickman, no relation to Dr. Glickman. We've been over this, don't worry. We are all good there. I am the 7 green social science teacher at GMS, and I was fortunate enough to coach these guys along the way to championship victory. So I think this is the key. So I made a little slide deck of the season for all of you and to celebrate all of these guys. So here we go. So our overall record was 13-2 in our championship winning season. And there's a picture of us at Woodland in the huddle. Fortunate enough to get that photo from one of our parents here. So that was awesome to have. And a lot of these pictures are from the parents, my cell phone, kind of put together as a whole. All right. So our team roster. All right, guys. So when I call your name, stand up, give a little wave to everybody, show off your tuxes and what you're wearing. So unfortunately, here is number 5, Max Cleveland. We'll give a clap for Max. Number 11, Grayson Ayla, take a stand. Number 12, Bryson Struck. 14, Jack Bentley. Number 15, Finn Murphy. Number 20, Jacob Heiser. Number 21, Will Foley. Number 22, Jacob Hansen. Number 23, Jason Demerci. Right? Hopefully I got that right. 25, Ricky Ochoa is not with us, but we'll give him a little clap too, Ricky. Number 33, Jared Van Dossler. Number 50, Isaiah Lee, not here. We'll give him a little clap. Number 51, Benny Matheson. Number 52, Ashton Bo Barrows. And sorry, Jace, for your last name. Number 53, Jace Eberly, right? Eberly. Every time. And those are 15 roster guys. All these guys put in their A+ effort day in and day out through practices, through our games, working together to become a cohesive unit as a whole. We like to call it a family. When we started practice from day one, from the tryout, and we had a roster date, we knew it was not just a team, it was a family. We were building a culture for the basketball program at GMS alongside the other coach and I, and even our 8th graders. We kind of built in together, and as one big basketball family, we took the season and had a very successful one, as you can see. So our season at a glance, we went 10-2 overall in the regular season. Our 2 losses combined were to both Woodland teams, unfortunately, but by just a total of 3 points. So that can tell you the season. We were 3 points away from an undefeated season. The points scored, we had 600 total points scored and gave up only 309. So we really pride ourselves on our defense and turning that into offense and our transition game, taking over from the get-go and coming out not flat-footed, hopefully. That's kind of what led us in our slower games where we were a bit closer in. But just that difference right there is what tells the tale of the tape with our season. We played an aggressive style of defense. We were on it from the get-go, switching up our zones to our man, and really hounding the other team, making them work for their points, and that showed up on the scoreboard. Completing our sets on offense, using our fundamentals to do everything, unselfish team play. We had so many assists, too many to count on the book of record keeping, and just working together as one cohesive unit. And even those on the bench or those that did not play that day were very loud on the bench, cheering on their teammates, and that led to some of the biggest successes of the season. So some defining moments that we had. We had a good, productive first one on the road at Viking, but we lost the following game to the Woodland Middle School, the Green team. After that, we had one more win, and then we went to Big Hollow. Big Hollow, we were down 10+ points 2 different times in that game. In the second half, we forced a overtime and then a double overtime courtesy of Mr. Will Foley, who had a season-high 7 threes and 25 points. The team really showed the grit and helped us realize that we were never, ever out of a game, and that defined our team, I would say, pretty early on in the season. Even when we were losing late in the game or late in the quarter, we quickly turned around and were able to turn that around. So we then went on a 7-game win streak, which was pretty nice, leading into a match with undefeated Woodland White on the road. It was a back-and-forth game the entire way, and we lost by 2 points. A lot of players took it tough. I don't know if you guys remember, but there were some cries. There were definitely some cries, and we kind of took it together, worked on it in practice, polished our team, and used it as fuel. We did not like that loss at all, so we used that as fuel and for wanting a rematch in the playoffs and hopefully the championship. After the loss, we gained 3 more wins right before the playoffs. Some of those highlights included a 48-13 win and a 45-9 win. And then finally, we had our rematch with Woodland White, the one that we wanted. It was a thrilling championship game, back and forth, and in the final 2 minutes, we pulled out a 33-28 win. We had a big lead down in the third, but we just wanted more in the last couple minutes, and that was our season. So here's some pictures with our trophy. Nice holding it up right there. You guys want to take that in? It's nice to see. Some more. A lot of celebration moments. The stone cold faces. And we were lucky enough to cut the net down, put on the trophy that's now in the front of GMS. And then thank you for your time. So, some more pictures.
Thank you very, very much, and congratulations. What an amazing accomplishment and leadership and sportsmanship for District 46. I know some of my board colleagues might have some comments they'd like to share, so I'll open the floor, and then I've got something to pass out to you. Anybody?
Congratulations, boys. I've known some of you, many of you, for many years, and I know you to be great athletes as evidenced by your championship. But to echo what Mr. Gross and Coach Glickman, I don't remember the other part of your name. The Glickman part stuck. Mentioned is I also know you guys to be extremely wonderful teammates and good sports. So thank you for the wonderful season. You've made the school and the town proud. Congratulations.
I'll just echo Mr. LaCroix. I wasn't going to embarrass you and tell you that I've known most of you for since kindergarten and maybe before. But it's really awesome to see you all here, to see you growing up into such amazing young men. And like Mr. LaCroix, I know you to be really pretty amazing humans as well as pretty amazing athletes. So congratulations. And I've sat with these parents at many a field over many a year and know them to be the best parents on the planet as well. So it's really, really great. Congratulations. Really fun to see this group here.
I also want to add my congratulations and thank you for all your time that you gave in practices and in making a family. I loved hearing about it being more than a team, but a family. So thank you.
So I'll add my congratulations too. And I'm so glad to meet you and glad that you came tonight. I actually have a question for you. Your coach described a game in which you were down 10 points and then you came back, and then you were down 10 points and then you came back. I think it was Big Hollow. Is that the right game? Yep. Can someone tell me, like, how did you come back twice in a game? How did that? Nice.
We had a good zone. Our defense really good. They had a good big guy, but we stopped him at the very end. It was just a good game. We played our hardest, and we got the win.
Well, congratulations. Thank you, thank you.
All right. I've got some ribbons to hand out to you on behalf of District 46 and the board. Come over here. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, typically, do you have anything else you wanted to share?
Oh, I'll take those. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I too want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you so much, Mr. Gross, Mr. Block-Lickman, and all of these gentlemen. You've done a wonderful job. We're so excited that you're here. We also know that you might want to go home, and we completely understand that. You are welcome to stay through our board meeting. We are about to share out information about our brand new website, but you can see that later if you want. So we will pause for a moment if people do want to take a leave. We understand. Thank you.
All right, moving right along, we have our presentation next for the new district website.
Oh, it doesn't, I don't think it matters. You can click it, Brandon. Yeah, perfect. All right. Good evening, everyone. We're so glad to be with you this evening. You can see that I'm here with the talented Leslie Armstrong, our district webmaster and media relations specialist. She will be doing most of this presentation for you because, spoiler alert, most of the work that you're going to see was her work. But I did say I would introduce the whole thing. So here we go. All right. We always start with our mission, empowering learners, creating equity, and cultivating community. We believe our new website meets all three of those expectations. We certainly do want to focus on cultivating community, though, because there are a lot of places on our new website where the idea is for people to come together, see what our district is all about, and add to it. So we had a communications goal for this year and a plan for this year, which included new website design. We planned for the fall of 2022, our new website would be up with features launched. We also know we had a lot of change in our technology department this summer, last spring and this summer, and that kind of pushed our whole project back. So here we are in January, ready to launch, and a little bit later, Leslie will give you some information about the plans moving forward and how quickly the website will be launched. Also, by the fall of 2022, we would have a plan in place for shared responsibility of content updates. That plan is now in place, and Leslie will be talking about that as well. And by this January, we're right on track for this one, we have a dashboard with key metrics launched, and Leslie will be showing you an example of what that will look like. There we go. So, going to just do a little overview of the timeline that have brought us to now. A year and a half ago, in the spring of 2021, we interviewed 4 different prospective web development vendors and selected one. And then in October of 2021, there was a kickoff meeting. We worked with our web developers and talked about the scope of the project, and agreed that in addition to creating a new website, we would also be creating a new district-wide logo along with district mascots for all of the schools. And really throughout all of last winter, that was our focus. That was our creating the new logo, and you all were here for that, and you probably remember the green cake that we enjoyed that dyed all of our teeth green, right? In case you forgot about that. And beautiful new logos. So that was last year's work, while behind the scenes, the web developers were working with Leslie for what was to come. So then January to March of 2022, concepts were being considered and reviewed. We were working with that vendor. And by last June, we had a beta version of what it would look like. I think you told me there were 15 slides, and what do we have now, like 83? Yeah, okay, so there's been a lot of work. But they gave us 15 slides to look at, and we started thinking about how we were going to build them out. This winter, really November through December, was when Leslie was working very hard to put together all of the content. I'm going to hand this over now. Look how technical that looks. It's yours.
Hi, good evening. So we were originally given a wireframe concept by our developers, and that gave us kind of the frame of what things were going to look like. We had several to choose from. We picked the one that we thought would work the best for our district, and we were given several pages: the home page, an about page, the calendar, the news page, and an internal page, and basically kind of sketched out what that was going to look like. After that, we got the initial build, and that consisted of basically looking at the colors and the photos and deciding what was going to be on what pages and fleshing out what the site would look like. As you can see in this example, that doesn't look like our district because we're not Peach. So things like that were being developed as we went along. And then from October to December, the initial build of the website, as we said, was expanded from about 12 pages to 81. It's about 83 now. For the district site and then the school sites, which were also being developed, went from about 5 pages to 20 pages for each school. So there's a lot of content there. It took a lot of time, and I'm very glad that we're at this point. So one of the main things we wanted with this new website was the added functionality of a content managed site. The previous site was a hand-coded site that I did in a text edit program, and that's how we updated the web, and nobody besides me knew how to do that. So we really wanted a content managed system that we could have others be able to update that site. You know, if I'm not here, which, you know, happens occasionally, that's what we did. We set up a stipend position during contract negotiations for school website coordinators. We created a job description for that, and we now have people in the buildings, in each building, that will be handling some content for the school pages. And we are setting up meetings and trainings, and we'll be getting to that in the next few days, in the next week or so. Some of the other added functionality, we have some easy to find quick links right on the home page, dedicated parent, student, and staff content areas, a new searchable staff directory, which we've never had before, with photos of our staff members and their email addresses, and website links will be there if they have websites. So we're very excited about that staff directory. We also have the dedicated news page, which I mentioned. These are filterable by building or category. So we have district-wide news that will filter onto the school pages. We have school-specific news that will be on the school page. It's a very nice feature to have that all in one place. And then some new content, new pages that we didn't even have on our current site. We have a new school safety page where we have information on ALICE training, the suicide prevention, the safety drills, all that kind of information. We have a new social media policy page, which closely mimics Facebook's responsibilities page for communities, basically telling people to be kind, to be polite, to not, post things that we don't want them to post. And now we will have a policy that we can direct people back to when we need to. We have school stories right on our homepage. Right now, these are Katie O'Brien's podcasts, which are just phenomenal. So we will have 6 stories that will always be featured on the homepage. Those will rotate, so new stories will appear there periodically. And as we get going, we will be featuring more student and staff stories as we go on. We also have our Community Connections page, which we are working on fleshing out. This has information on the foundation, on our PTO, PTF sites, food banks, basically ways that people can get involved with the district and connect with other families and get some resources that they need. And then we have our new financial dashboard, which is available right in the quick links on the home page, also from the business office page. And this shows a wealth of information on the financial health of the district. And we expected Mr. Wildman here to speak on this a little bit, but I see he's not here. So this slide just shows an example. We have quarterly data is on that page, as well as some historical financial information. And we do plan on adding some other dashboard functionality in the future. But this is a great start for us, and both of these are linked right on the financial dashboard page. School sites. We have 8 school sites, early childhood, and these are just showing you some basic quick looks at what we have, some information that's on the pages. A welcome to the school from the principal. We have some little fast statistics on the about page for the schools. We have quick links to the school supplies, to the student handbook, to register your student. There's a news section you can see the Falcon newsletter that's on the Frederick page. District boundaries, that's also on all of the school pages. And then for the upper grades, we have the athletics and activities, so that'll be all your information for your sports and clubs. And then we have these resource pages. As I said before, we have parent, student, and staff sections on the webpage. These are fly-out navigation bars with quick links on them, and then there's an actual resource page that has links to forms and flyers and all sorts of links that everybody can use for your respective group. So the next steps for the website, the content on the beta site right now is frozen until the site is live. I will be given the approval for them to begin the launch on January 23rd. So the vendor will be prepping the site for launch on January 24th, doing their, what did you say? The hocus pocus, the hocus pocus. So the name servers for the district, I know this is getting a little technical, and this, I was dealing with this all morning today. The name servers where the URL for the website, where it points to, that will change on the 24th. And the new site will launch on January 25th, between 10 and 12. And just to give a little historical NASA reference, I'm going to be sitting at my desk on January 25th at 10 o'clock, kind of being Houston, saying, waiting for the blackout, for the re-entry blackout to occur for when that page should switch. But we shouldn't see any downtime. It should immediately switch right from the old site to the new site, and fingers crossed.
All right, thank you. I'm going to talk for a moment about what comes next, what comes after this. So as Leslie stated, we are frozen right now. So any fantastic ideas that people have, we will write them down, but we can't do anything with them right now. So what happens after we launch? Well, we keep working. As we've been talking about kind of amongst ourselves, this is a living, breathing document. We can always be adding to it. One of the pieces that we're planning to be adding is we're looking at considerations for future additional dashboards. So, for example, we've been talking about our solar panels. We have the capability to display what those solar panels are doing at each of the schools that have them. So we're looking at doing that. There are other metrics that we may want to add in. We've talked about some of those metrics here at the board table in the past. As Leslie mentioned, we are going to be adding to that community connections page. So we want to add as many opportunities for parents and community members to get involved in the school district as possible. There may be some places that we're going to add some historical content so that folks don't have to recreate the wheel if they're looking to do something. We are definitely going to be adding a CEC, community engagement webpage, so that's something that Leslie will be working on soon. We're also building out an equity and inclusion page. Lots to tell you about that and the work that our equity and inclusion team and committee and our district equity leadership team have been working on, and lots to come on that. Then I'm going to leave the website now for a moment and talk about some other concepts that we'll be working on this year under the area of communications. We have our social media survey. So if you pull back for a moment to our strategic plan and our goals, one of our commitments for this school year is to do a survey of families to find out how are they getting information, what social media outlets are they using or other outlets are they using, and how can we make sure that families know that there are predictable ways to get information. So we are planning on that in the fall. And we are planning on really returning to finding ways to highlight our great work with the press. So over the last few years, we didn't have that many activities to bring people into, right? We were worrying about a lot of health and safety matters at that time. But now that activities and exciting things are happening in our school districts, in our schools again, we want to be able to bring the press in. So Leslie will be working on press releases, and we'll be talking about that. And that brings us, well, I believe the next slide that I cannot get to is questions and comments and feedback. So there we go. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. It looks like an amazing amount of work, and it's really responsive to some of the conversations we've been having. So thank you for including solar and finances and activities and volunteer work. And also thank you for hand coding what we had before. Holy cow, hand coding, that's like my worst nightmare. So thank you so much for all your work, Leslie, and your whole staff.
I think I have a prep period during the time that it launches, so I'll sit at my desk and watch with you. So thank you for everything that you do. It's marvelous.
I think the complexity of it, like, yeah, it's complex. And so I appreciate that after hearing about, just the amount of, it's not just one site. By the way, I had a question, but I forgot what it was, so I'm sure it'll come up. It was a really easy one, though. Like something about a date, but I can't remember what it was, so
I just want to share a funny story back to when you said it's not just one site. So Leslie came to our cabinet meeting recently. Oh, cabinet, you're about to hear me talk about you. And I didn't happen to be there when she came to the meeting. And the purpose was to share where we were with the website and see if anybody had any questions or comments or feedback to give. And Leslie had said to me, well, I may have some work to do after that cabinet meeting. I said, okay. So afterwards, I asked some cabinet members, oh, how did it go? And they were, oh, it was so wonderful. It looks so great. I said, did you have a lot of, changes for Leslie? And they said, oh, just, a couple of things. Then about an hour later, I talked to Leslie. She's like, well, I've got 7 pages of notes of things to change. So that's a perfect example of, we love you, cabinet. You just want it to be good. We know, we love you. So the point being, everything is complex and affects everything else. So thank you for seeing that, Christy.
And I remember, it wasn't a question. I actually was thinking about kindergarten registration, and because I know you're on the socials a lot. Like people start getting nervous about it this time of year. So just that, like, it's okay message. Like, did I miss? The people who are like, did I miss anything? Am I missing anything? I think a little like, it's okay, it's not here yet message might even be helpful for people. So that's all.
That's a great idea.
Well, thank you. It's all hocus pocus to me because I'm a Luddite. But it's clear how much work went into it and how much passion really too. You just can't put something together that looks as nice as that looks without it being a labor of love. So thank you for the care and dedication, and despite having to work with this cabinet and their unreasonable demands, I'm looking forward to being on the website. Thank you.
Good, all right. Anything else? All right,
just thank you, and thanks for all the information, echoing previous board members. Having that historical context for a lot of volunteers will be very key, I think. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, that brings us to board reports, and I think we have the share-outs for the III conference later in the agenda, so for now, just any other items that the board would like to share?
As the liaison of the board to the Foundation 46, at the last meeting, we learned that Tim Waddick has served as president of the foundation for 2 years and is stepping down. Wanted to thank him for his service and thank Jessica Medina for stepping up into that role. And to all the volunteers there who generously donate their time and energy to the foundation. They discussed ideas for bringing the Barn Fest event back, and so look for a save the date soon. It's probably going to be September 30th, so that should be fun. At the Community Engagement Committee meeting last night, we talked about documenting volunteer initiatives on the website. And another thing coming up is the Winter Community Cafe meeting on February 21st at Park Campus from 6:30 to 8:30. As a reminder, this will be a structured intergenerational dialogue, small group discussions, and want to thank Leslie for making the flyer. And let's see, looking at my notes here. Anyone unfamiliar with this style of meeting, there's a few guiding questions and small group sessions. And so everybody will get a chance to talk and listen to different people. That's the goal of it. An anonymous donor has offered to provide a graphic facilitator at this community cafe meeting, and that means we'll have drawings and visual representation of what we talk about that night. And in thinking about our mission and vision and learning beyond our walls, I just wanted to share there's an Every Kid Outdoors National Parks Pass for 4th graders. So any families looking to travel spring break, summer break, this is a way to see a bunch of sites and not have to pay as much, and make it more accessible to all kids. And I wouldn't have known about it had a friend not shared it with me. I just want to make sure people know it exists. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Albert. Mr. LaCroix?
Nothing in addition to the triple I share out, no. Thank you.
Mrs. Braden?
It feels like several months since the GMS Winter Band concert. But in fact, it was only 4 weeks, and I apologize that I was absent from this meeting to be there. I know it might be stealing your thunder as well, but students were phenomenal. The music was incredible. The fact that Mr. Thomas has 7th and 8th graders doing jazz improv just blows my mind. It's really incredible. And then also just wanted to thank Mr. Smith and others who help. There's like this, I don't know how to describe it, but there's 3 bands, and they all play in the same concert, and they all have to, and then at the end he assembles mega band, which I love, and all the bands together. But everybody who helps like get the timpani where they need to be and move kids and stands and everything, there's this whole like production that happens behind the scenes. Yes, yeah. That's pretty amazing too, as well as the music. So it's just always a good time. And although it feels like a long time ago, it was since the last time I was here. So always grateful for our music education.
Thank you. Mrs. Miller?
So just one quick add to the community cafe. I wanted to thank, there are several people who are working on the calling team to make sure that we make those invitations available to as many people as widely as possible. So we've broken, I'll talk more about it later, but into stakeholder groups. And those people are Jody Sinkmars, Kelly Cartwright, and Patricia Baking. And we possibly have a student joining us, but that's not certain yet, so I'll refrain from adding that person's name. But they've been fantastic about reaching out to the real estate community, to the CLC and professors there, and also specifically to the park community. So thank you to them.
Thank you. And I'll add, in addition to the performance that we enjoyed the evening of the concert, I was able to go and attend the Wizard of Oz at Grays Lake Middle School, which was a brilliant, brilliant rendition of, well, just everything, from the students on stage to the crew to the pit, to the lighting, to the tech crew, everybody from top to bottom. It was a fantastic performance. And then it does seem like time has passed quickly. I also had the CEDAL board meeting, and it's a little foggy in my mind, but I was there. And they were there. This is their quarterly meeting. They spent a lot of time talking about the climate and culture in CEDAL, working towards a lot of launching of different SEL protocols that are important for the students there. They're looking at potentially launching a new database for SEL and culture-related items. If you have anything to add from your work on the executive board, there'll be another board meeting coming up, I think, I believe coming up in May, maybe, or June, and I'll report back in the summer on that. Thank you.
I also have a message from Tamika Nash.
Yes.
Mrs. Nash couldn't be with us this evening, but she did ask me to share from her that that she hopes that the community members found fruitful ways to give back and be of service on Monday in honor of MLK Day. So I told her I would share that.
Thank you. That brings us to the superintendent's report.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to start by talking about the work we've been doing with Wold, our architecture firm, because we've been doing a lot of work over the past couple of weeks with that firm. So I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed. As you know, we have embarked on a study of our facilities with Wold, and that's a big study, and there are many, many pieces involved. Currently, we are in phase 1, where we're assessing the educational adequacy of our schools and all of our buildings. And so we've had a lot of conversations with the Wold team, quite a few telephone calls that then turned into a meeting with Cabinet. And so they got a lot of great feedback from our Cabinet team last week. This week, they came to our leadership team meeting in this room, I think it was just yesterday, and talked with the rest of our administrative team, including all of our principals, about what's to come, and specifically with the principal's role in providing feedback about the buildings. So they will be, over the next 2 weeks, meeting with each principal, and in many cases, department heads, directors will be coming to those meetings as well to walk through the schools, talk about what's going well in our buildings and what our needs are. So that's the next step, but there's lots more to come, and it's exciting and really very nice to be working with those folks. I'm going to hand it off to Amy Gluck to talk about today's meeting that also happened in this room.
We've been spending a lot of time in
We
this room.
have been. We're going to like it.
Good evening, everyone. We had our DELT meeting today, so our district equity leadership team, and this was our final meeting, and so hard to believe that this was our last day for really planning our equity action plan as a result of the audit. So met together, you may remember from a previous report that we have 5 strands. So those strands are systems, teaching and learning, student voice, climate and culture, professional learning, and then family, community as agency. And so those strands really finalized what our implementation and action plan are going to look like. And that's going to take place over the next 18 months. We are so excited. Part of the work today, too, was preparing for the February 1st board meeting, where the members of the DELT are going to come share out more information about the EAP, about our equity action plan. So you're going to get to hear a lot of information at the next meeting. And we're looking forward to sharing it. There's some great work today.
It was really great work. All right, and we're going to hand it over to Dr. Chris Woke, who's going to talk about the hiring timeline, because we have to hire a new AP for this school since we promoted the current AP to principal.
Yes, just before winter break, we had cake to celebrate Mr. James Goshi becoming, moving from the assistant principal here at Frederick School to the principal here at Frederick School. That means we have to fill those shoes. I am excited to announce that yesterday we launched the application, so that is posted, and that will be closing on February 10th. We hope to bring the final candidate to you at the board meeting on March 15th.
Thank you. Dr. Diaz has information to share regarding our access testing, and I think also, Dr. Diaz, are you talking about the bilingual educator grant? Perfect.
So we have 2 quick announcements. Access, which is our English proficiency test, that is the state mandated exam, started today actually, and it goes until the middle of February. We have just under 700 students taking this test, so here we go. And then in other news, ISB awarded us just over $30,000 for our educator grant for bilingual teachers. So basically to kind of grow your own, or anyone who has working in a capacity as a bilingual teacher who has a degree in something else, ISB is funding most of their education for their endorsement. It's very exciting.
And we have some details we need to work out, and in fact, the grant is, we're told we get the grant, but we still have to apply for the grant, and they didn't tell us how to apply for the grant quite yet, so more to come on that. And finally, Heather Lorenzo has information to share.
I shared a sneak peek a couple meetings ago about our Family University coming up, and you will be seeing the flyers that Leslie created for us coming through your buildings, through their communications, and I can share that with you via email as well, so you can see that. And the topic is self-regulation and resilience, supporting our children in their hardest moments, and the presenter will be Dr. Doug Bolton. And that will be February 2nd from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Grays Lake Middle School. And we are working with a virtual platform option as a backup for families who cannot come in person.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's it for the soup report tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Glickman, and everybody else. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda, so I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. And this is where I was supposed to say, including the personnel addendum. So I'm going to say that again, including the personnel addendum form that was sent earlier today.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Mack.
Aye. All right, thank you. That brings us to a few action items to go through this evening. The first one is need a motion to approve student fees, early childhood tuition, and facility rental fees for the school year 2023-2024. I need a motion.
So moved, and I just want to clarify, we were going to table the student activities
Yeah,
fees, right?
I can speak about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, in Mr. Wildman's absence, I will speak about this a little bit. So, what you're voting on tonight, first of all, are the registration and technology fees. Those fees have not been increased since 2019, 2020, and it is our recommendation that they stay the same for next year. The student extracurricular fees, that's what you're asking about, Christy, we had talked about at the last meeting and meeting prior. That's the thing that we're tabling, so you're not voting on that tonight. We've recognized that we have some more study to do, more data to collect at the end of the year with our students, and then we'll be bringing an even more informed recommendation to the board at that time. We couldn't halt the entire process because, as Mrs. Braden has acknowledged, we have to get kindergarten registration going. So we have to, we have to finish up the process of approving student registration fees, but the activity fees, those can wait. So we'll be talking about those again in May. Then our preschool tuition-based and transportation fees, those we are recommending to stay the same as they were last year, and the same for our facility rental fees. Although, as we talked about, I believe at our last meeting, we're recognizing that our rental fees may need some study for the future. So next year we could be coming to you with some recommendations for changes. But for next year, for the 23-24 school year, we are recommending that they stay the same as this year.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Albert.
Aye.
All right, the next item is I need a motion to approve the Math Resource Dreambox. I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, comments, questions on that one? Okay.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Mack.
Aye. The next one up on the list, motion to approve the Wold Architectural Services proposal for the 10-year Health Life Safety Survey. Need a motion for that.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Okay, comments, questions on that one?
To have a quick comment, and I'm going to address
Yes.
it to Mr. Halpern here. It's not really a question, it's a, is it standard, or could you ask for whenever it's presented to us, whatever the proposal results of the survey? I'm assuming the results will come back to us at some point. If the history is not included, I'm just curious, 10 years ago, what was urgent, what was required, what was optional, so we could look at it over time. So is that possible to ask them to include that information in that
So
report?
that is, they might have that, but most likely we'll have to go through the ROE. The ROE will have that in their list as to what was sent out to them prior. Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay.
Albert,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Miller.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. And the final motion on the action item is a motion to approve the contract award for the roof replacement at Prairie View School. I need a motion for that.
I'll move. So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions or comments on that one? Okay.
Mack,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller, Aye. LaCroy.
Aye.
Very good, motion passes. We do not have any unfinished business on the agenda. That moves us immediately down to the new business section, which includes our individual share-outs of the Triple I Conference back in November 2022. We can just go in order this way. Mrs. Albert, if you'd like to start, we can just go this way.
If fellow board members want to follow along and be able to see something, I did email it, or no, never mind, it's coming. Yeah, so we can skip the first two. I just wanted to frame it as, I was keeping in mind the mission, the vision, the goals, and why I went to certain workshops. And so the first one I went to was a whole half-day school finance for school board members. I did some training when I initially was on the, or join the board, but it's always beneficial to keep learning and continue to be good financial stewards for our district. And I learned about reading the annual financial report, tips for maximizing education dollars for our students. And then I learned something that I hadn't really been, I wasn't aware of it before, that the state of Illinois by law is supposed to give the district 80% of our transportation expenses. I was curious, do they? Is this one of those things?
Yes, I deeply wish Mr. Wellman were here tonight
Yeah.
at this time, but yes, we have
Okay.
no, yes, we get
Okay, good. Okay.
it's transportation reimbursements, and we do
Okay,
get them, yes.
Great, okay. We also, my attendance in that, through my attendance in that workshop, we as a board got a $100 off coupon for a future board workshop. But we have to do a workshop between now and May, so it's just throwing it out there if we want to do another board development workshop. Yeah, yeah. So next one was, this is kind of a heavier topic. We've had Alice training. We've talked about a variety of things related to the major societal problem that we have of mass shootings. And so I wanted to go to this session on student behavioral threat assessment. And it's not behavioral threat assessment in the sense of like the way first responders do it. It's a combination of case management, social emotional learning, a bunch of team members from all over. And as someone who is not familiar with that at all, I found it very beneficial to learn about it and also read about it in a book called Trigger Points. It's listed in there for you. So Eric Arnold is part of the Illinois Terrorism Task Force, and they provide funding and training across the state. And so I just wanted to make our board aware of that he can present to the board and the community and explain how to do behavioral threat assessment, which I imagine is happening. I don't know if it's to the degree that he was explaining, but how to legally work within the HIPAA and FERPA laws. A key takeaway is that people don't snap, and I want the community to recognize that it's more of a process, and people leak information. It's called leakage, where they share clues here and there about what they may be intending. They may intend to do a targeted violent act. And this model, the behavioral threat assessment model, is derived from the FBI, Social Security Service. It's been around 20 years. It's
Mrs. Albert,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, may I interrupt? Is there a slide
I'm
that has
sorry.
that? Okay.
Yeah, we need to go to slide 5. Okay, sorry. And I feel like I could just keep talking for hours, so I'm sorry. Anyway, I learned a lot about how that pathway to violence is linear, or is not linear, it's fluid. Ways to look out for those leakage points. The next slide, the components of risk. This is a key one.
for you.
Oh, okay. This is the part where navigating HIPAA and FERPA is key. And then moving on to the next session that I attended, turned out to be kind of a sales pitch, but it was interesting because it was about measuring impact and academic return on investment with different projects and initiatives in the district. And I was very appreciative of Amy Gluck and other staff members and what you've done to give us in the November meeting the assessment overview and how we read that data and what it tells us. I found it interesting to look at that, be able to look at that data and figure out where do we need to change those lessen those learning gaps. Next one was about knowing your audience, community engagement. This was another one where I was thrilled to find out that we're doing a lot of great things that are working well, already doing some similar work. And a couple of questions I had, is there a bilingual parent advisory committee at District 127, and do our two districts work together? Oh, okay. So, yeah, that was, that and the family university type things, this particular presentation group pointed out that that the high school and elementary districts could leverage their resources in that area. And then families don't have to choose between going to two different districts' activities and events. Lastly, went to, if you move down, whoops, sorry. Renovation and expansion for equity in facilities. And this was another fascinating look at data and evidence, studies about our buildings and surroundings and how they affect students. So there's a lot of information there. If you want any more, just let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Albert. I feel like I went to those sessions now.
Oh, great.
That's amazing, amazing overview. I didn't get as lucky with the sessions that I chose, unfortunately. There was only one of the three that I went to that I felt was worth reporting out on. And Dr. Mack also went to that session, and I'm going to let him elucidate on that one. But it was a really interesting session on amplifying student voice with a seat at the board. It was Oswego District 308 and the process they went through to formally introduce student ambassador to their Board of Education. I will let you take that, Steve. I know you're super excited about it. One of the other sessions that I went to that I've been to in past years that I thought was very interesting in past years, and this year I found it wasn't, and the reason is because it hasn't changed much, and that was the legal review. You can't make this stuff up, a legal review. So there's a couple of old-time education legal minds who, it's almost a two-man comedy show that they put on, and that's why I think it was so, the first time I saw it, I thought, this is really great. But I kind of felt like it was treading the same ground this year. It talked about the same things, you know, the culture wars are coming to your school board, battles about curriculum and mandates, and I just felt like if you haven't been to it once, I would suggest you go to it once maybe, if there's nothing else in that time slot that really attracts you to it. But having been to it once, I don't think I'll go to it anymore. So I wanted to spend the time I had in my board report on the III sessions talking a little bit about the general session, which we all went to. Those of us who attended III went to the general session, and if you remember, it was a journalist and author named Amanda Ripley who talked about conflict, high conflict, good conflict versus high conflict. And I had kind of a realization as I reflected on that session about the difference between good conflict and high conflict. She described some of the elements of good conflict. They can have unpleasant elements to them, right? Surprise and anger, complexity. But they can often lead to productive interactions that can lead to resolutions of conflict. In contrast, bad conflict has elements like contempt and righteousness and rigidity. And so when I think about, you know, a particular issue where, and I'm mentioning this in the frame through the lens of what I do on this board, which is servant leadership, right? And we've had some issues in the past couple years that have had these kinds of divides and polarization. And it's easy to talk about the elements of bad conflict or high conflict, and you can recognize those elements in the other side of the issue that you're on. But if you really, what I found when I reflected on this session was that I recognized elements of high conflict in myself. And that it's easy to say that other side, the other side of whatever issue I'm on is rigid. It's, you know, contemptuous towards us, towards my side. But I found that I was having those same feelings about it. And so in order to really make positive change and connections on issues that are tough and sometimes intractable and can cause high conflict, I really felt like it was important that I recognize that in myself. And I just wanted to mention that insight that I had from that general session.
That was a great session, and I bought the book, and I have not read it. But I actually, I don't want to retread it, because I think, you know, some of the same learnings that Jason had, I had, because I wrote down my personal reflection from that session was, where might I be playing the role of conflict entrepreneur? It was a very, like, self-reflective, this isn't about other people, this is about me. And I think that was a really important aha that I had as well, so thank you. One that I went to was on health and life safety bonds, and so timely, given that we are embarking on our 10-year survey. So I now know about that they exist, and that based on our findings, our report, you know, that we may have that option to fund HLS projects through issuing HLS bonds. If I say more about it, you will find the limits of what I know. But I figured it's enough to be aware, and that way we'd be interested in hearing from Mr. Halpern, Mr. Wildman, if and when we get to that point where we need to make an investment based on the results of that survey. So I won't be surprised. It was good information. The one that was most meaningful to me that I went to was the Doug Bolton, same Doug Bolton that's doing our parent university. And it was very similar to what Ms. Albert shared. It was about rethinking our response to school violence, but it was from the lens of building student connection and belonging. And it was really powerful. I know that a few of us were in the room. There were some interesting pieces to that puzzle. One was, and I know that the safety committee is actively meeting, and I know that during our Alice conversations with the community, the question came up about SROs, and there was some data shared in that session about what is the linkage between SROs and safer schools, and the data shows that it's a large investment that does not get the desired safety outcomes. And so I thought it's just a really good point of reference for our safety committee as they look at how do we follow evidence-based protocols that actually show that they keep students safe. And that's really hard when there's a lot of high emotion and conflict in the community about how we address school safety. But, you know, it's just a place where I think we could dig deeper and you know, make sure that we're evidence-based in how we come to those decisions. And then the other thing that came up for me was, you know, he talked a little bit about sort of how these things build as well. And he talked about, you know, someone who's experienced in complex personal struggles, they have a plan, there is a sense of alarm from others, and they have easy access to guns. So what can we control? How can we help people who are be responsible gun owners, given that it's legal to own handguns in this country? And so I talked about this a little bit after the Alice training, but it really, you know, and I know we're going to showcase the gun storage safety education at the parent university, but I just want to renew that message that I think wherever we can find a place to help people remember that as a community, how can we create a culture where we're having these conversations that can be a little uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, we want to know that we send our kid to somebody's house and they own a firearm, that there is no way that kids can access it. And I think that's a conversation that I hope spans the full spectrum of how people feel about firearms. So the last one I went to was on recruiting and mentoring future school board members. One of the main things that came out of that, and I specifically wanted to mention this because we have couple people in our audience who are highly, highly involved in our district and do so much for it. And we talked a lot about how do we use committees, PTO, and the foundation to identify potential board members. So, not a pitch, not a pitch at all. The other thing that came up that I have heard.
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you exactly. Could you say that one more time?
It's if you serve on the PTO or on a committee, you make a really good potential board member. That's what I said. Yeah. I know. And women, I had heard this before, but it was reiterated. Women have to be asked to run 5 times before they say yes. 5 times. So just in thinking about like the conversations that we have with the community, let's keep talking to people. And then the only other things most of it was like people sitting at a table going, I don't know, what do you do? But 2 things that I thought that we could do is refresh our onboarding packet, just make sure that, I know Sue does a really good job with it. Is there opportunity to, update it based on where we are as a district, and then considering mentors for new board members as they come on board. So those are my things.
All right, thank you. I'll start off with the one that Mr. LaCroix alluded to, the amplifying student voice with a seat at the board table, and feel free to add anything too. But this is something we've been talking about for a while, and this was I thought this was probably, aside from Dr. Bolton's session, was probably the one I enjoyed the most. And it had representatives of it was Oswego, you said, right, it was Oswego. Had members of the board there, as well as, I believe, leadership of the district. But the most important people at that panel were the students who were serving on the board in their different capacities, or had occupied the student seat on the board, or were upcoming going to be on the board, and what that took. And so it's always been curious to me how to frame that, how to create that for us, because I think it's something that we really should very seriously consider. And in this case, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. LaCroix, but these were high school students, correct? But they also did address the idea of it being an option for middle school as well. So they did allude to and discuss, a 7th grader or an 8th grader. They probably leaned more towards the 8th graders serving in a student role on the board. And what was interesting about it is the structure that they outlined was, what does that entail? We all know that a student rep would likely be an advisory position, but what does that mean? So they addressed things like, what type of information would a student have access to, right? They would have access to the open meeting, not the closed sessions. They would have access to the board agenda that we get to prepare for these meetings, but certainly not the more sensitive things that come through a district. And that seemed to be a common theme with some of the people in the room on, how do you structure it so that the student has an active voice in it, but we're sensitive to the information that they can and cannot see. So they talked about that a lot, and the students were really impressive. I mean, they shared about their storytelling. They shared about them finally arriving at a point in their school career where their voice wasn't just heard in the classroom, but they were sitting at a table where some of the decisions are being made about what they're doing in the classroom. And so they felt certainly much more valued, or at least had a voice in that at that table, which they haven't, in the 150 years of public education or so, that's never really been the case. And it was just really interesting to hear about that. They shared their excitement about having an advisory vote. They enjoyed being able to vote, even though it doesn't count in the vote total of the board, but and I believe it was one of the girls, I can't remember who it was, said that they felt that their vote was taken into account by the board members who were also voting. So they felt like even though it wasn't tallied as a vote on a board vote, it still had value and meaning and agency for these students, which was really, really neat to hear. They were just very dynamic. And like I said, they did talk about 7th and 8th grade involvement, leaning more towards an 8th grader just from a maturity level, but they've had 7th graders serve as well. And for our district, that seems to be where that niche would fit, perhaps, for a student advisory representative on the board. They also did address, and I don't think I'm making this up, they did address sometimes the lateness of the board meetings. And the busy schedules for the students, that was another concern. Like if sometimes we never go late at this board meeting, but we, if they have practices or if they have homework and they need to be able to leave, that was something that they worked into the position as well to allow for that flexibility for a student who needs to, go home and rest, right? So just a really, really good, did I miss anything? I think I got it all. I'd like us to see maybe some movement in that respect. And I had sent an email to one of the presenters immediately after the session, but I have not gotten a response. So I'm going to read out to those presenters again. I'd love to talk to them on a one-on-one basis and get a little bit more, dive deeper into that process. Rethinking our response to school violence. I was at that session with Dr. Bolton, and he works with Wakanda as well as us. And the one thing that I wrote was, how do we address the root causes of school violence when we continue often to alienate the things that are happening that build up that ramp that Mrs. Albert was talking about. It was just one of the most moving sessions we were at. Of course, I was at the general session, and just to give you a really quick insight into my quick-witted, deep comments, I said, great session with a great book. That was the extent of my comment on that one. But it was really much more than that. I also went to a session called Building Your Brand. And again, ever since I've been on the board, one of the things that I love to talk about is telling the story. And so these panel members were talking about the district, the board, the staff, the teachers, the students, the parents being the primary driver of our district message, how we share that message. And I think the new website is a prime example of what's happening in that building of the brand. Not only the new logo that we've done over the past year or so, but all of that wonderful information, the stories on each of the schools, the newsletters, everything seems to be, it's exciting to see a lot of the things that we're doing. One thing that came from that for possible follow-up is outreach opportunities for board members. I know we talked about this once before, where each board member is assigned to a school, and we have 7 schools and 7 board members, so it works out perfectly for us. And you partner either with a teacher or a staff member, and you visit that school for a certain period of time during a particular academic year, and then it switches so that you can rotate throughout all of the districts. And I really like that idea. I don't, I get to go and see things that my kids are at, but I don't often get a chance to go and see other things at other schools or get a chance to know the people there. So that might be an opportunity for us to partner and assign a board member a school for, a quarter, and then you rotate to something else. That was one thing they brought up that really, really stuck with me. And those were mine.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to share information about the presentations I went to, but I wanted to comment on a couple of things first. First of all, Dr. Mack, as you were just talking about having a student participant on the board, I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback and thinking regarding that. So one of the things we talked about prior to this meeting is having thinking, using the lens of our strategic plan for any initiatives moving forward. Interestingly, that one, even though it's not, we don't have a goal on our strategic plan that says, let's have a student on the board, I can tell you that the equity audit work that we've done, which is directly related to the strategic plan, does have a student voice element. In fact, we have a whole piece that's about student voice and how we bring that student voice forth. So this would fit nicely there. And so what I would suggest is that, Dr. Mack, when you feel like you've gathered information, and by the way, if you'd like me to assist with that, I certainly can, we can add that to a board agenda for more discussion if that's something that you want us to pursue. Okay. The next thing I wanted to share, again, before I share any of my learnings from that day, is that we did just receive a request for proposals for next year's III conference. So if anybody has any ideas of things that you would like our school district to highlight and you'd like for us to put in a proposal, be thinking about it. Let us know. We have until March 6th to put in a proposal. So just thought I would mention that. All right, on to my own adventures that day. Related to the strategic plan, I too went to building your brand, related to the communications goal. It was very much about the importance of constantly pushing out positive messaging, using a wide variety of tools. And one of the key presenters was Kathy Kajigian, who's the Director of Communications and Strategic Planning in Glenview District 34. And I'm mentioning that because Christy Braden and I will both be at the Ed Red dinner next Monday night, and she is speaking. She's the keynote speaker, so I'm really looking forward to continuing my learning from Kathy that night. I was also at Dr. Doug Bolton's presentation, Rethinking Our Response to School Violence, and it was really interesting to hear him share similar information to what he's already been sharing with our staff and that I think he'll be sharing with our parents, but through this lens of this is how we respond to and avoid school violence. It's the same message, right? It's just a different lens for that important information. Not as directly related to our strategic plan, I appreciated a presentation I went to on staff retention strategies, and it was mostly about nurturing talent from within. And so that's a place that we are always working in our school districts. So that was nice to see. And I'm going to hand it on to Christy.
Thank you. Brandon, do you have my? Wonderful. Thank you. So just want to echo Mr. LaCroix's comments about Amanda Ripley's presentation. I think I was levitating during that her whole talk. Bought the book, read it, bought her other 2 books, read one of those too. So I really loved that and found that to be so useful. And I'll just share, so much of it was useful, but similar to you, I had this moment of, when am I that person? When am I the conflict entrepreneur? And if you're not familiar with that term, it's people, companies, media outlets who inflame conflict in order to find meaning, power, or profit. So it really made me sit back and think, okay, when have I been the one, and what was I gaining from that, or was I engaging in good conflict? So I found that very powerful. I also liked the concepts of the false binary and humiliation, and again, then scaled it out and went, when have I been part of a group that has done that? So I found that really helpful as a prioritization tool for myself too, to make sure I'm really careful about where I get information, who I'm listening to, what companies, what organizations. In fact, anyway, so all of that was great. That said, I started the conference with 4 key questions, and those are the questions. The first is I wanted to leave the conference with a graphic representation of the relationship among policy formation, district mission, vision, values, implementation, and maintenance. I wanted to discover principles and language about reviewing and monitoring district progress, and then think about what might our board need to codify and post-pandemic policy. And as context, I just joined the policy committee, so I'm trying to wrap my head around what that looks like and what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm not going to share all of the different workshops I went to. This is kind of a synthesis of everything that I learned, because I pretty much focused on policy the whole time. So here's my graphic representation. This was probably familiar to those of you who have served on the policy committee, but I found it still useful to write it out. That the board connects with the community about district goals, then the board and the superintendent collaborate to transform those general goals into SMART goals. The strategic plan identifies the means by which the SMART goals are achieved. The board develops, updates, reviews, monitors, communicates related policies, and then reports progress back to the community. So I think that's pretty familiar. I zeroed in on the policy, and that's the next slide, I believe. So again, diving into those roles, I focused on the reviewing and monitoring role, and wanted again to think about the principles and the language that surrounded those. So in the I went to 3 or 4 presentations about policy and kind of winnowed down these questions that I heard that I thought might be useful. When we're reviewing policy, does it make sense? Does it reflect our beliefs? Is it still what our community wants? And is it getting us where we want to go? monitoring, are we making progress toward our goals? Is the district in compliance with policy? And are we getting the results that we intend? In one of the sessions, I have found myself consistently feeling challenged by our goals. And I wasn't sure why. And so I brought them to the presenter, and he was able to share with me that our goals are very general and they're binary. We're either doing it or we're not. So we're creating something or reviewing something or exploring something. And I was like, oh, that's why. Okay. And it makes sense because we created those goals, at least in my mind, it makes sense during the pandemic where we needed flexibility. So potential action steps might be to work to move those general goals into SMART goals so that we can report progress in more than just a binary way. So just something to think about. The other thing I heard in all of the policy sessions was this tool that ISB has, which is a calendar for policy review, where they take the goals, the strategic goals, and identify relevant policies to those goals and then put them on a calendar. So in October, during a regular board meeting, there's a section of our agenda where we would look at the policies, ask some of those review and monitoring questions, and then report back to our community progress that we're making. So I just thought that might be interesting. So those are potential action steps. And the next question I had was, what might our board need to codify in policy after the pandemic, and how? So again, just went back to those basic roles, and I think some of these are familiar, but in the role of developing, what they said is that the role of the policy committee is to develop policy, and that's having a board process and having monitoring data to refer back to. When we update, we're looking for legal compliance and changes in the community, and we're very well positioned to do that with all the work that we've done, and it's consistent with our mission to cultivate community. Again, monitoring, we're looking at results and the district's direction. When we're reviewing policy, it's looking at the relevance and alignment with the district's direction, and then communicating results and progress. So potential action steps, if we don't already have this, and maybe we do, but to develop that policy monitoring calendar. And in one session in particular, they recommended, if you haven't done this or if you don't have a regular habit of doing it, starting with those first 4 policies, that goals and objectives and the educational philosophy and objectives, those 2 in particular should be unique to the district, and we should develop those uniquely. And then the other the next 2, school accountability and school wellness, they recommended we start, given the culture right now, I'm not exactly sure why, but they recommended we start there. And then the last 2 are policies that I've heard us talk about. I know the community connections policy is relevant to what we're doing on the community engagement committee, but then also procurement, I think I've heard Tamika talk about that too. And that brings me to the what else question. Or I'm sorry, the next question, which is how is procurement shifting and where are those changes reflected in board policy? So again, I went to a few different sessions, legislative, and then the last session, which Jess, I think you talked about, and I've forgotten the title of, but the equity in facilities. Yeah. And 2 resonated with me based on what we've come back and talked about a few times. One was the Better Lunches Act, which changed the procurement code and opened it up, which we're familiar with and we know. And then this one I didn't know anything about, the workforce expansion. That's been a topic in legislative action. And they said to watch for legislation coming down the pike where there has been conversation about lowering some of our regulations and mandates to allow for non-academic experience for teachers. As a former educator, that raises concerns for me. So I thought, okay, it also raises curiosity. Like, what does that mean and how is it aligned with teacher qualifications, if I read that correctly? And the other one is the Equity and Renovations, District 158. Again, Jess talked in much more detail about this, but I really liked that they engaged the community through an advisory committee at the very beginning of their facilities development and renovations. And that advisory committee conducted a literature review And that looked at the impact of the physical space on student performance and achievement, on the health of all building occupants, as well as on occupant or academic gains. And they had some pretty compelling results. They had improved test scores, they had more equitable distribution of funding, they had legislative support, so it actually catalyzed legislative support for additional funding. And then their HR department was able to use that advisory committee conclusions to help attract and retain teachers and other staff. So I thought for action steps, again, create some sort of policy monitoring calendar that we could report back some of the things we're doing with lunches and facilities and all the other things that we're focused on right now. Develop monitoring criteria for relevant policies and convene an advisory committee to help us define monitoring criteria for facilities improvement, because we've gotten so much public money for that through the ESSER funding. That leads me to the what else. So is there another slide, or did I not do the one? Is that it? That's it. Okay, so the what else I think I wove in then. But those were my key takeaways from Triple I.
Okay, so most of mine have already been talked about, but I can still give a little bit of information. I'm going to start with Dr. Bolton just because I think it was my favorite. And I just wanted to share one thing that I haven't heard yet, and that is he spent a lot of time talking about belonging to a school community. And in that, he talked about that belonging is both preventative and an intervention for students. And I think that's really important. And I know we've been doing a lot of work with him around a sense of belonging this year. And so I think that's just continued conversation that we need to have. I also, as Mrs. Alpert talked about, I went to that session that ended up being a sales pitch that we did not know was going to be, but it was about measuring impact on academic return. And I think some of the things that I just was thinking about through that session was really about how do we continue to create that culture of evidence-based conversation and discussion in order to impact our instructional planning. And whatever method that is that we are using, just making sure that we're continuing to have that conversation and keeping it at the forefront. I went to a session that was a legal session about curriculum. And so it was two attorneys from the same law firm, but they were talking about new Illinois mandates that were in the 22-23 school year that we need to be teaching, and what does that look like, and really getting in depth about some of those. And then also talking about what are some practices that we can have as a school community related to any kind of questions that parents might have related to our school curriculum. And so gave us some more information about that. And I went to, this was an incredible session too. I went to a session on women in leadership, and the entire panel was female superintendents from across the state. And it was, one, I think, empowering to sit and to be learning from these amazing women, but really had great conversation about the relationships between boards and the district, and how what a difference we can continue to make for students. So good sessions.
Surprisingly, I did not have any overlaps with everybody here. And surprise, mine focused around recruitment and retaining staff. Actually, I'm live. The first one I went to was a Google session, and it was very cool things that Crystal Lake 47 is doing, put on by their tech department. Not a lot of great takeaways that I could bring to our department, but got me thinking about a couple different things. And I've created some crazy spreadsheets, doing some coding that auto-populate into other spreadsheets. It just kind of piqued some things, and I'm blowing everybody's minds. They were surprised. But it also, if you go onto our student resources page, our hub, our technology hub, some of the things that they've done is what Mr. Vipon started to do. those videos on how to get things started. They've taken it to the next level. They're doing a lot of things for staff, putting it on their intranet, so staff, if they have any questions, that's their first reference point. Attracting and retaining diverse staff, and the teacher shortage put on by Rockford 205. Wonderful presentation, a lot of different information on different universities that they've collaborated with, how they've, Rockford University, they're providing in-house degrees basically to their paraprofessionals. A lot of different things that third largest district in the state can do. But I came away with a lot of great ideas on how possibly do some tuition reimbursement as we start to look into trying to get staff to be endorsed in different areas. Teacher residency, that was a equity presentation put on by Evanston 65. Not a lot of takeaways from there. Evanston shared a lot of their history and where they've come from, and now they have a new superintendent, and how they're trying to redistrict some things. It was a lot of good history about the systematic racism that existed in Evanston, but like I said, not a lot of great takeaways that I could bring with me. And then the last one session that I attended was best practices in crisis communication. Again, Crystal Lake 47 put on their technology, their superintendent, and their PR group. And there was a lot of cool information there on all the systems and structures that they've put into place for all these different things that could happen. They didn't share out specifics like this is X, Y, Z, but how they built up their structures and how they've worked with different organizations to make sure that in the event of a crisis, they know who to go to, who's their spokesperson, who's talking to the media, who does this, step-by-step instructions, and who's going to just go and deal with the crisis, and everybody has their role. So it was a good presentation, a lot of good takeaways from that.
All right, thank you. We do have an item on here, community cafe discussion.
Okay, so you might remember we have the community cafe on February 21st from 6:30 to 8:30 at Park Campus. This time, it's the third community cafe we've had in the last almost 4 years now. And this one is tied directly to our strategic plan and is focused more narrowly on outdoor learning spaces. So I wanted to share a little bit of the process that we're using and ask for some input, if either now or if you want to think about it, I would welcome email too. We started with identifying some stakeholder groups, and these are people that we're going to and have started extending targeted invitations to. So we've got, again, the purpose of this cafe is around creating and expanding outdoor learning spaces at Avon, Frederick, GMS, and Park Campus. So with that in mind, we thought, okay, what kind of content, what kind of information, what types of perspectives do we need in the room? And we came up with this list. So we certainly need educators. We need the architects, students, real estate agents, homeowners, school influencers, mental health providers, landscape designers, facilities and grounds maintenance providers, scientists, connectors, and artists. And we focused on these stakeholders as people who would be directly impacted by the decisions that we'll make about those outdoor learning spaces. And each brings information that may not be familiar to everyone else. So the design is, as Jess said early on, small group conversations with report outs, and it'll be captured in a few different ways, and those are the outcomes. So the tangible results from the cafe will include a newspaper mock-up, the record of small group discussions, so all those Post-its, and visual note takers mural. That'll be both the tangible mural and also digital copies of the mural that can go out to all participants and to us. And a list of people willing to conduct individual interviews and report back to the board. And it's that fourth one that I wanted to ask you about. If we go ahead and do this with asking at the end of the night, are there people, we would end with something along Christy Braden's question of what voices are not in this room right now that still need to be heard from. And are there people that would be willing to reach out to 1 or 2 or 5 or maybe 10 other people and go through an interview them and bring their responses back to us as a board? My initial thought is they could do that in a public comment. They could come back and just tell us what they learned. They could also give us the written copies of their notes. We could, I have seen and heard about boards that have suspended Robert's Rules of Order during the public comment time, and the board members spread out among those people who have agreed to conduct individual interviews, and we talk one-on-1 or 1-on-3, and then we come back and we share, we reconvene in Robert's Rules of Order and then share back what we learned. But I'm curious how, 3 things actually. Are there stakeholder groups that we're missing? So again, people who are directly impacted either economically, ecologically, or socially by the decisions that we'll make. If there's an equity standpoint, that's really important, especially because our board is heavy on Woodview and Meadowview representation, but not on the other schools. And then, so stakeholder groups, are there any that we're missing? And 2 is, are these 4 outcomes helpful to you as we listen for criteria? How might you use that criteria moving forward, if at all? And then more specifically, maybe tactically, how do you want, if you want people to bring us information back, do you want me to bring in a board report? Do you want Jess to bring it in, or either one of us to bring in a board report? Do you want them to come talk during public comment, or is there another way that you want to get information? I think the easy one is stakeholder groups. Does anyone have any, are we missing anyone?
I don't think you're missing anybody. I would just always want, because this is something that you and I have had a conversation about, and we had conversations about this. I remember this. We had a meeting with a parent, and this is always, of course, related to special education, right? Yeah. I want to make sure that, and I mean, maybe a stakeholder group to include in this would be therapists, like physical therapists, occupational therapists. Developmental therapists. I mean, I know some of those people are also educators or mental health providers or whatnot, but they also occupy a way in which they can speak to the design of those outdoor classrooms that, even though it's outdoors and might be easily accessible because it's outdoors, may still not be accessible.
Not to a wheelchair,
Not to a wheelchair, definitely not to a wheelchair, but also to even just in terms of, sensory processing and lighting, movement through a park that might impact the way in which those things are done. And if we're looking at those stakeholders, I would add a separate, separate bullet point as a physical therapist. Yep. They might have some unique perspectives that we haven't tapped into.
Yep, absolutely.
And I know we have them on, in the staff here, of course, naturally, or through CEDAL or through private providers or whatever. And I think that would be a wonderful addition to that. Otherwise, I think that list is incredibly comprehensive, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah. That's really helpful.
I had 2 that popped that were very specific. So one, I know Avon Township is building an outdoor classroom. They got a grant from somewhere, so Michelle Bauman might be an interesting
She's on our list.
Yep, okay.
Yep. We have community members at large too. I didn't add that in, but yeah, we do. So thank you.
And then I was also just thinking Nature Walk School.
Vicky's coming. Yep. Yes. You and I. Anyone else? Like anyone?
I'll think about that 4th question.
Yeah, that's
it's a harder question. Yeah,
that's an interesting question, and where do these outputs what do we do
what do we do with
What do we
them?
do with the outputs after? I mean, I think it's gonna come, I think there'll be some wonderful discussions and interesting, like, just to get a sense of like, oh, what's possible? And so then, like, how do we pull it back into, how do we get there,
Yeah.
over time?
And we just met with the architects, was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yesterday, and agreed that those tangible outcomes are going to lead to the criteria, they won't, let me rephrase that. They're going to contribute to the development of the criteria that we as a board could use if we decide to make decisions about outdoor learning
Yeah,
spaces.
my memory of the conversation with the architects was that it would be clear to the people who come to the cafe that those who are at the cafe are not designing new outdoor spaces. They're giving input in terms of what would be useful and valuable in an outdoor space. Exactly, yeah. And that the architects will actually take that information as well to be able to make recommendations to the school district.
And I love, love, love the visual note-taker mural. And I also love that it's going to have a digital aspect to it so that it's going to be easily shareable across the community. So,
If anyone has any thoughts about that, I would very much welcome them. And of course, everyone is invited to attend. And something to think about too, as you maybe consider who else might be interested in joining us. The premise behind outdoor community cafes in general is the idea, as it relates to public education, that our facilities are held in public trust. So while they are primarily instructional spaces for instruction and for education, they are also neighborhood amenities. And I think that's especially true in our communities. So if that resonates with anyone that you know, especially those folks maybe who are looking for a positive way to jump into education who don't have children in the district, this might be a fantastic opportunity for them to understand what's happening in our community and how amazing our district is.
Which made me think of Park District, which you probably already thought of too.
all right, great conversation. That brings us to topics for future agenda items.
Yeah, we do have quite a few. All right, so next board meeting, we'll start with a policy committee meeting. Board, as you know, or policy committee members, as you know, we have a very, very long list of policies up for review. We are not expecting to get through all of them in one policy committee. So we have a policy committee meeting scheduled for 5:30 on February 1st, and then another one 2 weeks later. And so whatever policies we discuss at those two meetings, at each one of those meetings, we'll then be talking about briefly during the board meeting as well. All of that, the plan being that we'll do approvals for policies on March 1st. Back to February 1st, we'll have our equity action plan presentation that Amy was talking about. We're really excited about that. We'll be bringing an approval of Director of Innovation to all of you. We have our final interviews tomorrow. And we plan to begin the conversation about the district calendar at the next board meeting on the 1st. We are in the we had a calendar committee meeting last week. We have another one tomorrow, and we should be ready with the draft for you to look at on February 1st. Moving over to the 15th, again, policy committee, policies. I believe we're having a composting presentation that evening, Mr. Halpern. Yep, fantastic. And then we hope to be able to approve the calendar on the 15th of February. March 1st, at the moment, all we have is policy approvals, but I'm sure that's not all we really have. And as Dr. Wilk mentioned earlier, we'll be bringing the Frederick School Assistant Principal recommendation to all of you on March 15th.
Any other suggestions or items that anybody? All right, busy, busy, busy. All right, that brings us to the public comment. Are there any public comments? Sign up, yes. Go ahead, go ahead.
I'm Liz Wixer, still. Hasn't changed. So Mr. Halpern had me email him, so he's going to give me a response to that question I asked at the beginning of the meeting, so that was very quick. One thing, that was really cool to see the website. I'm really, really excited for you and for everyone else. I had a couple questions at some point, which I'll put into an email and address to you, about how much control the PTOs will have over their own web pages, what we can put in, how often we can change things, stuff like that. Also, is there going to be a searchable and filterable district-wide calendar? So if you've got like 3 kids at 3 different schools, you could see everything that's going on at once instead of having to page through. And then just as a suggestion, one question that shows up a lot in the Grays Lake Moms Facebook page is what is the before and after school care? So just a suggestion to maybe relabel that drop down that says right at school to say before after school care, and then maybe right at school in the parentheses to make it easier for new parents to find. We have a lot of local knowledge that is confusing when you move in. It was really cool listening to everything you guys have learned, and now I really want to go to one of those. One of the things, let's see, I'm looking for my notes. It was when Christy Braden was talking, student connection, recruiting and mentoring future board members. One thing that might be worth having a conversation about is the fact that there's other board meetings that happen at the same time, so people have to choose which boards to go to. So I know the Park District Board meeting is happening right now, or probably happened an hour ago, because they're like 30 minutes long. And maybe having an event at the farmer's market of like meet the board members, something like that in the summer when people tend to be moving into the area. District 127 has student reps. I wasn't sure if you guys were aware. I think so. Yeah, they get nominated by the principals, and then they come and experience it. And they're not all seniors. Some of them are a little on the younger side, so they might be a good resource for how to implement that. I thought the touring the schools sounded really cool. That's actually something that D127 does as well. They actually arrange tours for the whole board at North and then at Central, because there's not a lot of overlap. That was it. That was all I got. So anyway, just thank you. Really appreciate. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we don't have a closed session tonight? Okay. All right, I will take a motion for adjournment, please.
I will move.
I will second.
Okay.
LaCroix,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Mack, Albert,
Aye.
and Braden.
Aye.
Wonderful, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.